And I'll tell you another thing that's crazy, because as I've kind of been thinking about this and studying about this, in even the most extreme cases of what, so you look at the extreme cases of like murder and stuff, then you look at the extreme cases of bad people, right? Gangs, mafia, that kind of stuff. Even within those, there's goodness. There's people who, like, two guys go and knock over a liquor store. They don't walk out in the parking lot, one shoots the other and steals the money. It doesn't happen. There's honor among thieves, right?
Right.
I mean, and there's certain untouchable people. You don't mess with certain people's families. I mean, and it's all about this trust and honor that they have. So there is still within that goodness.
Yes, standards. Exactly.
Barriers aren't going to be crossed because for no other reason, because they're trying to be good in this little environment that they've created for themselves.
This is Zach with The Average Christian, back for the Project Think podcast, and we're glad to have Tim Haywood with us today, who's a campus minister. I've known Tim for 20 plus years, and he's worked, like I said, in campus ministry. He's been involved with preaching. He still preaches and teaches quite a bit, and Tim is interested, has a knack for dealing with young people, helping young people, leading them. Teaching, has a real knack for preaching and the way he presents his lessons and the way he teaches people. And so we're glad to have him today. Glad that you could join us as well. We want you to rate this podcast so other people can find out about it. We also want to invite you to our website, which is theaveragechristian.net. And also go to YouTube and find our channel there. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram as well. We'd like you to get involved, and hopefully this will help you. So this is our podcast about why be good with Tim Haywood. We've been talking about why be good. What's the point? You got to start with what is good. Like, okay, who gets to call the shots here?
Exactly. Because when you look at the grand scheme of things, we've talked about before, no one can decide on what's good. And so it really kind of gets down to, how do you view the world? How do you view the world? Do you view it that, like you and I do, that there's a God who created us for good, who sent his son to die on a cross for us, and who gave us his word, the Bible, that is our standard for living? Do we view it from that view, or do we view it from a view that he doesn't exist? Because each one is going to mandate certain behaviors and certain beliefs. A Christian worldview, we're going to act a certain way. And a worldview apart from God, we really owe it to ourselves to also act a certain way.
Well, yeah, see, that's where it kind of blows up in my face. And I mean this sincerely. And maybe I should have taken up the guy I mentioned in the comments and gone back and said, and maybe I will go back and ask the guy, okay, what are your 4 answers to these questions? Because I mentioned meaning, morality, destiny, and origin. So where do we come from? Why are we here? What do we do while we're here? And are we going anywhere when we're done? Now, I borrowed that, but it made sense to me because those are 4 questions that God answers. It takes faith to believe those. But then the morality thing is like, how do I form that if you take God away from me? If I go down your road, and if you're an atheist, if I go down your road, how do I form a sense of this is the way ought to, and why ought I do anything?
Exactly. Well, I told you about an article that I read. A girl was in a polyamorous relationship, and polyamorous, lack of a better word.
Explain it.
No strings attached, friends with benefits. Basically, both partners in the relationship are able to have as many sexual partners as they wish within a polyamorous relationship. So she wrote this article trying to erase the stigma of people who chose to be in polyamorous relationships. And her deal was, before she entered this polyamorous relationship, she had a lot of misgivings about it. She was very uncomfortable. Surprise, surprise, right? And the boyfriend who convinced her that this is all right, right?
It's the guy.
It's always the guy. He said, he brings up the argument, like, why should we deny our lust? Why should we deny what we want? You look in the animal kingdom, they have several different partners. They're not monogamous. And who should tell us, this monogamy is a social construct. So why should we deny ourselves from having multiple partners if that's what we want? And he has a pretty good point if God's not part of your worldview.
Yeah. But that was my whole point. Like, why should I deny me anything? Because you can't really tell me why. Well, it's better. Oh, according to who? It's better. According, like, well, it's nicer. Well, you don't have, like, tell me who's going to define nice. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Is that according to you? Because if God didn't exist, I don't have to care what you think.
Exactly. So, like, if monogamy works for you, great, go for it. And if polyamorous, polygamy, whatever, if that works for you, cool. You know, good is whatever you say good is. If God is not there, I like to think about it like this because I love food. I mean, I love food, and so kind of my dream, my fantasy is a world where calories and essential vitamins and nutrients don't exist. Right?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right.
So if that's the case in the world, if calories and essential vitamins and nutrients don't exist, what's your plan for eating every day?
Oh, whatever I want, man. Donut group. I'm making up new food groups.
No, right? I mean, I'm eating pizza every single day and candy.
Yeah.
Like,
chocolate, man. Chocolate group.
Right. Because if those things don't exist, why the heck would I eat broccoli?
Right.
Why would I eat salad? I've been trying to eat salad all week and it's been messing me up.
Yeah. That's right. Hurting for certain. Oh, man. Yeah, that's the same point. But you can't ignore, or just because you want to ignore, like me and you have, calories and carbs and all that stuff doesn't mean that there's no consequences.
Absolutely. You can live, and you're right. Like, I have lived a lot of my life with pretending this worldview, that doesn't contain calories and vitamins and nutrients doesn't exist. And we pay health consequences for that. Just because we say it doesn't exist, they're there. And we have to be cognizant of that. And it could be that when we talk about good, that there's going to be consequences for good and consequences for not behaving good, regardless of what our worldview is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's hard to get, going back to the sense of good, and I'm going to bounce back and forth here, going back to the sense of good, where a lot of people see like the guy in the relationship and trying to convince this girl of friends with benefits and let's just do whatever our bodies tell us, that sort of thing. They look at Christianity, following God period, as restrictive. Mm-hmm. And it's not that way. There's a sense of good. There are consequences if we're looking from God's point of view, and I don't want you to suffer those consequences. Mm-hmm. When you see that, I know the verse gets mentioned, John 3:16, God so loved the world, which means, or you look at 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 9, that God is long suffering because he doesn't want anyone to perish. He wants everyone to repent. He's not willing that anyone should die in hell. In fact, Matthew 25 talks about he didn't even create hell. Hell was created for demons and the devils and so forth. So it's not so much restriction. It's here, look, I don't want you to have to deal with this, which is what a dietitian would tell me. I don't want you to have to deal with this. My son is a type 1 diabetic. What do you think the endocrinologist is telling him? I don't want you to lose your eyesight. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to lose your feet and legs. So you got to eat like this and check like this and do all this stuff because there are consequences later.
Absolutely. And so, yeah. And the obvious, if he's saying, no, I don't believe it. And a lot of diabetics do, and it's sad.
Right. Yeah.
Then they suffer terrible consequences.
Yeah. So
the idea is, if it doesn't exist, and if you really believe that God doesn't exist, then why do good in the first place? And there's a lot of places, a lot of crazy places that we can go to as Christians. And I think it can help us in a couple of ways. Like, one, I think it can kind of help us to see motivation from people that we think are just flat evil. And
how do you mean?
Okay, so for let's take an issue that's very emotionally charged, like abortion.
Okay, all right.
Okay, why do people who never intend on getting an abortion, why do they advocate for a woman's right to have an abortion? Why would they do that? I don't think it's because they have a sick desire to see babies killed. I really don't.
Yeah, because they're not lining up to watch it and view it through a plate glass,
No. I think they honestly think in their heart of hearts that they're doing good, that they're standing up for an underdog.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And in a very misguided way, they're doing good. They have a sense of doing good. Now, Solomon says there's a way that seems right unto a man, but its way leads to death. It is not within us to be able to decide what's good and not, but we want to. You know, why do heterosexual people march at gay pride events?
Right. You don't have a dog in that fight, man. Some of it's peer pressure. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. I won't go into all those, but yeah, there's a sense of this has been the underdog or the oppressed, and they have been. Let's be honest here. There have been people who are quote unquote Christian and heterosexual who have mistreated these people. I understand that, and the reaction to that is to let's go the other way and defend all these rights. But why?
But why? Exactly why? If you are a heterosexual person, what is the motivation for anybody to have any other rights? Like it doesn't matter. Your life is not going to be better or worse on that. But a lot of people support that. The same could be said with causes like saving animals, which are fine causes. I think we should try to be kind to our environment, to our animals. But if there's no God, then why?
Yeah, convince me to do it.
Convince me to do it. They say a certain population of animal will be extinct in the next 50 years. What do I care?
I know, it's like one guy said. He said this certain owl, the comedian was talking about this certain owl, it's going extinct. He's like, so when's the last time you walked in the pet store and went, dang, you're out of owls?
Right. Exactly. And I think, and there is a call to goodness that we feel, a pull to goodness, right? If the environment's only going to last or be comfortable for another 200 years, what do we care, man? Give me the biggest diesel truck there is.
Yeah, I won't be here.
Right.
Yeah.
But this idea of goodness, because we want to pass it on, we want to make things better than it was when we got it. Where does that come from? Even in the worst cases, you have gangs, you have mafia, this kind of stuff. There's still honor among thieves. I mean, there's still people who execute goodness even within the most vile of places.
Yeah, there's certain limits that they won't go to. And why is that? Why won't you go past? One guy was was doing a Q&A at a university along these lines, and he had a question, and if I remember right, the questioner was like, it was questioning these very things. How can you say there's this standard and this, that, and the other, or something around the idea of why is there so much evil in the world if we claim there's a God and so forth, which has a lot of other discussion for another time. But he was saying, well, what if this happened to you? And he gave him what if somebody did this to your wife or your daughter, blah, blah, blah. And he stopped and paused and said, I would hate it. I wouldn't like it, but I couldn't say it was wrong. And the response was, you need to go find out why. Excuse me. You need to go find out why you hate it so much. Mm-hmm. There's something in there that's telling you this isn't right.
What was it, for the young lady who wrote the article about being in a polyamorous relationship? Yeah. Why did she have misgivings right from the beginning?
Why does it have a stigma?
Why is there a stigma?
Exactly.
Right.
You say, well, that's culture.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not necessarily. Because it's widespread, and it's not just Christianity or people that believe in God, but there's a sense of duty, there's a sense of responsibility, a sense of right and wrong. Where does it come from?
Where does it come from?
Why do people feel like they owe? That was the thing that C.S. Lewis, I remember reading Mere Christianity, and the last third of that book, I just but the first 2/3 of it were really interesting because he sort of used logic. And people argue back and forth about logic, but he used logic to try to make his way through. It was either pantheism or Christianity. And one of the things that really struck him was this sense of ought. Mm-hmm. Like, why should I get up? And this is what, in the 50s or so, why should I get up if a lady gets onto a subway? Why should I get up and give her my seat? Mm-hmm. Or why do we respect lines? Like, this person was in line before me, and so if I get in front of that person, it's wrong. Why is it wrong? Why do I feel that way about it?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And you could, if without a sense of God, right, you shouldn't feel wrong. Skip the whole line if you want to.
Exactly. And that's all going back to that question of why do people want to do good? Mm-hmm. Do you think people want to do good?
I think the evidence is overwhelming that people want to do good. even when people do things that we agree are bad, a lot of times they're doing it out of a sense of goodness. We look at Paul, when he was Saul, he persecuted the church. A lot of people died because he thought he was doing the right thing.
And that's the thing too, like you use the phrase persecuting the church. If people don't know, you don't read about it, you go back to, even we as Christians don't sometimes kind of skip over the Jewish persecution because we want to talk about what the Romans did to the church. And he was murdering Christians, and he was on his way to Damascus with a bunch of legal documents to say I could jail these people, because Jews thought this is crazy. These people are following this guy that popped up and said he's God's son, and it's the worst blasphemy ever. And Paul thought he was, like you said, he's doing the absolute opposite. And that's what Jesus said to him in Acts chapter 9 when he met him on the road. What are you doing? He, the whole time thought this is the way to go.
Well, and even the Roman persecution, Nero was a crazy dude, but he felt like he was being patriotic. He felt like he was, preserving Rome from this upstart and preserving the gods of Greece, against this upstart religion. Everybody has motivations for good that's, deeply planted within them. Right. I think the evidence just is overwhelming on that.
And so, now can you get somebody to be honest? That's the question is, will all of us be honest? Why is that there? And where does it come from?
Yeah, and that's the big question. That's the really big question is where does that goodness come from? And I think if you are looking at this from a Christian worldview, you know where it comes from. Mm-hmm. And if you aren't, you have no idea where it comes from. People say it's your conscience. Well, where's your conscience come from? I agree. I think it is your conscience. Yeah. But where's that come from? So people tell me all the time that I look like my dad, right? And I remind them of my dad. I talk like him, and I have mannerisms, facial expressions that are like my dad. And I'm sure people kind of tell you a lot of the same thing.
Yeah. Some of them are cringy. You're like, no. Sorry, Dad's never going to listen to this probably, so it's all good.
But there's a lot of ways that you are like your dad. I mean,
sure,
you guys both have big booming voice, and you command a room. I mean, just a lot of good things we get from our father.
Exactly.
I heard of a young man who not too long ago was reunited with his biological family after like 25 years separation. He was given up for adoption at a very young age. And when you look at the pictures of him with his family, it's no doubt. I mean, it's okay. Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Right. We've known of sad situations where family members have disowned each other, where parents have disowned children, children have disowned parents, and there's hatred there, and it's awful. And what's crazy about it is these people won't have communication with each other. They don't want to see each other. But if you see them and you see each one of them, there's no denying. They still have each other's DNA. They still have each other within them. And so no matter how they feel about them, they're still going to project the image of their parents. Mm-hmm. And you know where I'm going with
I do. Go ahead. I'm just going to let you roll, man. I know exactly where you're going. Because that's really the follow through after this is, okay, if you're curious about why we all have this seemingly innate sense of trying to do good to some standard, what do I do with it? How do I figure out? So go ahead.
In the Bible, it says we're created in the image of God.
Right. First chapter of the Bible.
And when he created us, he said it was good.
Exactly.
And so he created us and it was good, and he created us for good. And so you talk about this idea of good, we're good. Mm-hmm. He wants us to be good. That's why he created us. He said we were good. He created us for good. Mm-hmm. And his image is good. And I would take it to another level. It's not just good, it's love.
Yeah.
1 John 4:7-8, God is love. Mm-hmm. Let us love one another.
It's not a characteristic. It's just who he is. It's not a choice. For you and I, it's a choice because of the position we're in. But for God, it's who he is. Good is who he is. He doesn't decide to do good, or he's not tempted by the devil and those things.
Absolutely. I mean, and so if goodness reigns on earth, if goodness lives on earth, if love lives on earth, even in, a polyamorous relationship, the idea of love lives on earth, where does it come from? Yeah. It comes from our Father who created us in love, who created us for good. And we can deny that. We can deny that relationship, just like an estranged son will deny his father. We can deny that relationship. And I can also deny that calories exist.
Right.
And we're going to feel the effects of that. Exactly. And so the idea, like you said, we can't deny our Father. We can say he doesn't exist. We can say I'm not going to live under his rules. We can say I'm not going to live with this worldview that he exists. But
yeah,
why are you good?
Yeah, this spawns a lot of questions, like why do we exist? I started thinking about different thoughts, like why do we exist, and why did he make us, and those sorts of things. And there are lots of reasons and answers to those that are too big for the topic at hand. But the question, I'd like to ask people that don't believe. We're talking about good, and we're talking about standards. It's funny. I started thinking about the guy that's trying to convince his girl that, hey man, we can have sex with whoever we want to. Why didn't the girl look at him and be like, well, why do you need me then? Like, exactly. why am I not just, another notch on the belt or whatever it is? But like, if she would have said, no, we're done. Like, why would that have bothered him? You know what I'm saying? Because he's like, yeah, he even has the standard. I want to have you just how I want to have you. You know what I'm saying? So if we're looking at this sense of good, why not try God? I don't know that anybody, maybe there's people that can, maybe people can, if I can step into their mindset, can say, okay, why don't you try atheism and see? It's scary to me, but I've actually tried to think through that. Okay, take him away. And then I have these questions that I mentioned in that video I was telling you about on the channel of I don't have any answers now for origin. And I know I'm rambling here for a second, so bear with me. But I know I don't have any answer for origin. Evolution doesn't tell me where I came from. Like, oh yeah, well you came from blah, blah, blah. But nobody can still give me a starting point. Like, how did all this start? We just keep going backwards. Nobody can tell me if I'm going anywhere. And that's the big one that everybody seems to want in times of need with their family. I hate to bring it up and don't want to drag you through anything, but with your mom, one of the big things is, that's not the end. Right. It hurts in a way that I can't even imagine. But most everybody, even people that atheistic, don't believe in God, want to know some way they're going to see that loved one again, that's not just it forever. So that's the back to these 4 questions. Well, with the sense of good, how do I behave while I'm here? Well, that we go back to that standard. Who gets to set it? Well, can you suspend disbelief for a moment and say, maybe this God is perfect and he is good and is all these things you were just saying, and he wants the absolute best for me, and he defines what is. It's confusing because what do I see? A bunch of Christians who aren't living up to that standard. I see some hypocrisy. I see blah, 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 blah. Well, that's true, but that's why Jesus has to be the focus and God has to be the focus.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're so right on that. And what it does too is, like when you say, when you allow that to be a possibility, right, then it things start to make sense. Like, okay, yeah, that's why it's wrong to kill people. That's why it's wrong to steal. Where a lot of these widely accepted, but not fully accepted views, now you can kind of put a little more, you give them a little more reason. But the scary part about that is, if there's a standard, then there are probably things in my life that are living outside of that standard, and there's consequences. And you know what? It's just as true for me. Except, I accept that God is, that is my worldview. And just like I fully accept that calories exist, but obviously I don't live like that.
There's hypocrisy. Right. There's a standard. I do too, but I don't live according to it.
Right. And all of us are. We're fallible.
Sure.
And the amazing thing about God and his love for us is he provides this way through it all, because he knows that we can't do it.
And still wants to save us, even though, that's kind of getting, there's a verse I'm thinking of where we're kind of getting back to, and I'll mention it in a few moments, but I mentioned hypocrisy. There is a big letdown. We're human beings. If you go and look at church, and I mean not the building, but the people, the real definition of church, you're going to see, if you want to, a lot of disappointment. If you look at it in the wrong way, you're going to see a lot of foul ups. But the same thing, like you just said, happens everywhere else. Same thing happened when Al Gore was going around selling carbon credits, flying jets to wherever he was
right.
to save the planet and
right.
try to convince all of us, putting out 2 movies. There's hypocrisy there as well. But you mentioned grace. And for anybody who's listening to this who doesn't know, grace, you hear Christians, you always use the 2-word definition, unmerited favor. What they mean is God giving us what we don't deserve, which is, I deserve, in this belief system, I deserve hell. That's what I earned. Thank God he gave a sacrifice and made a payment for what I couldn't pay for with Jesus. And now with his blood, as odd as this may sound to some people, covers all those sins because I'm willing to follow him and live by that standard. Not perfectly, but try to. I don't think there's a better deal in the world. And it says in Ephesians 2:8, by grace we were saved through faith. That's me adhering to that standard. And we were created for good works, or his workmanship.
Zach, you know what kind of, when I think about this, what's really a very glaring omission to the world's sense of good is the idea of grace.
Yes.
And you see it a lot. You see it a lot today, especially in the media. When somebody messes up, when somebody crosses this line of what they decide is good, we live in a cancel culture where it's like that person, we need a pound of flesh. They need to lose their job. They need to lose their house, whatever.
Matt
Go
Lauer.
live in a hole somewhere, because there's no coming back from that. Yeah, and you're right. Matt Lauer is one of them. And I'm not advocating for Matt Lauer back on the air, but the man needs to be able to make a living,
Right.
And I'm sure he's got plenty of money.
Poor Matt.
but there's plenty of other people like that too. I mean, good grief! Last year, that poor high school kid that was on the news that a lot of people jumped to conclusions, decided he was making fun of a Native American, and it turned out he wasn't.
Right.
But this kid, he doesn't deserve to graduate from high school now. He can't go to college. He can't make a career. Well, he just settled for a whole lot of money because the fact was he didn't do anything wrong.
Oh, that's the same kid with CNN.
Yeah.
Thank you, CNN.
But he had to, because he's going to have trouble getting into college. He's going to have trouble getting a career because a lot of people have already formed this opinion in their mind of what was good and that he crossed that line. And grace doesn't exist. Grace absolutely doesn't exist. And that should scare a lot of people. That should really scare a lot of people.
Because then if standards are created by human beings, that means I'm left with human beings as my judge, which scares me to death. It was David. I can't even remember where he said that. It was after Nathan had told him that he had sinned, but David basically said, "I'd much rather be judged by God than people."
Yeah, well, you think about the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus says in Matthew 7, "Judge not lest you be judged, because the same measure will be judged back to you." Well, it makes a lot more sense now, right? If we're allowing a standard that the world sets, that man sets, there's no grace in that standard. That's pretty scary.
I never thought of that. I'm glad you brought that up, because now it's got my mind rolling. Yeah, it is. And that means if there's nobody else, I'm just accountable to, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but whoever has the biggest stick makes the rules. And that's the only reason you could say, well, you should comply. Because I'm using some arbitrary, but if you speed, then you're going to get a ticket. Well, if I don't care about the ticket and I can outrun the cop, then go for it. You know what I'm saying? Have at it. But I lost my train of thought. I do that because I get going. But that grace thing is where I was coming back to. I would rather, and that's, you got a God, the God, according to our beliefs, the God saying, I want to forgive you, not I want to burn you down. That's the opposite of some of our culture now.
It's crazy, because I think a lot of people don't understand what to do with grace. They don't understand where it fits in. To go, pop culture again, Michael Vick, they years and years ago, He made some terrible mistakes with a dogfighting ring. He was suspended from the NFL, out of the NFL for at least 2 years, maybe longer, because he was in jail. He served his jail time. He paid restitution.
Yeah.
He's done
community service,
done amazing things to actually stop dogfighting in the 10, 15 years since that's happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's turned a new leaf.
And so this year they want to make him an honorary captain in the Pro Bowl or something. And people cannot get over something that happened 15 years ago that he has spent the rest of his life trying to right that wrong. Right. There's zero grace. Right. Zero grace.
How much does he have to do? I mean, with God, at least I know, and man, the deal that God gives, I mean, it ain't like he said, well, my son died on the cross, so you got to do the same thing. No, all you got to do is imitate it. All you got to do is sacrifice, and just for a little while too. And then when you're done with all this, you will be in bliss that I don't think the Bible says a lot about heaven. This is me thinking opinion here, but I don't think the Bible says a lot about heaven because we can't grasp it. John tried his best in Revelation, but that's the whole difference. He's not even looking to burn us down. And Michael Vick was another one. And it's funny you mentioned him because I did a bulletin article back when I was doing those. And a comedian alluded to this once. And he was talking about doing this tennis and golf extravaganza. And he's in front of a bunch of rich people. And he was talking about Kobe. He said raped a woman. I don't know if that's true or not. OJ killed a woman. And both of them walked. Michael Vick killed some dogs, 2 years in Leavenworth. So the moral was keep killing and raping those white women, but leave them dogs alone. And you say, well, what's the problem with that? Because who's to say that's bad logic without God? And I always thought too, Michael Vick could have run down and taken his girlfriend or his wife and paid for an abortion. You never heard a word about it, but he killed a bunch of dogs and he spent 2 years in the pen.
Because of the standard of good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who picks? Who chooses?
Who chooses? Yeah. Who chooses? That's the scary thing about it. You know what? I think there's another avenue though that this discussion can really go is when we turn the light around and we really focus it on Christians and us, right? And it's because it's about communication. And politically, right now, there is zero communication. We already know what the other side believes, and they already know what we believe, or so we think, right? We think that anybody who stands up for abortion is pure evil. Yeah. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong, because I believe the act is pure evil. Yeah. But if we can kind of come to terms with this fact that this idea that no, believe it or not, a lot of these people who are arguing for that right are doing it from a place, a very misguided place of what they think is good. And it can help us communicate with them and vice versa. Now, the hard part is getting a non-Christian person or a person without a Christian worldview to try to communicate as if they have one, because they don't have to, that they are fully justified in thinking that we're just hateful and evil because they don't have anybody to answer to.
And sometimes we act hateful and evil toward them and so forth, and the divide gets larger. And I don't even know, that's part of the conversation here is how do you approach that with somebody? And it's something that scares Christians is open-mindedness. Some of us can be very closed-minded, but to get somebody to open their mind and say, okay, just try it. If you've never tried belief in God, try it for a minute, suspend disbelief and act like, because we use our imagination all the time. So I would ask somebody who didn't believe, use your imagination for a minute and see if this is palpable, if it's enticing, which is what this whole book is about, is God trying to entice humanity to believe and follow and love.
I'll tell you, this is something that I've honestly, it's a thought that's kind of been floating in my brain for probably 20 years at least. And where the light bulb really came on for me. And I know I've told you this story before, but I was, 16, 17, 18 years old. And I was on a plane from Nicaragua flying back to the United States. And we had been down there. We did a clinic. We did Bible studies. And we did a gospel meeting, helped a lot of people while we were down there. On this plane ride back, there was another religious group who had just done the same thing. Now I'm sitting by leader in the church, and then another young lady who was on the trip with us. But this leader who didn't attend church with me, he's from a church maybe in Ohio or something. Right. He's sitting by me, and he has his rigid view of right and wrong. Okay. The other group who had been in Nicaragua doing these good things, right? They're just jazzed. They're fired up, and they're walking through the plane. They're handing out tracts to everybody on the plane. So this guy, this leader, he takes one of the tracts and he opens it up and he starts writing lies. You're going to hell. You're sending people to hell. And he starts laughing. So he's making a big enough scene to one of the guys that's handing out tracts. He comes back and he says, "Hey, what do you think about that?" And the guy answers, he kind of laughs. He's like, you don't want to know what I think about that. He's like, "No, I genuinely do. I genuinely do." He's like, "Well, what I think is that you really enjoy sending people to hell." And the guy was like, "What?" and he's like, and then the only other words out of his mouth the whole time in this argument that ended up ensuing was, "Ever heard of Acts 2:38?" and I'm sitting there embarrassed, incredibly embarrassed, and thinking, these people don't get on a plane and fly to Nicaragua and fly back and distribute tracts on and pay crazy amounts of money because they hate people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we're going to hell. We want you to go too.
Exactly.
Right.
They
absurd.
are doing it from a sense of good. And what's really, really hard and upsetting is they have the Christian worldview and they're so close. And the way the communication there can actually be pretty good, but the communication this guy decided to choose was totally off. He knew what they believed. He knew what his motivation was. And when you know that motivation, there's no communication.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's the Matthew 7 you were talking about, judging in that standard. And man, I would want to be in his shoes. And you even don't want to even be connected with those people. Like, nah, I'm not with that guy.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing is conversation. And that's part of what's missing in our culture too, for lots of reasons. We're so well connected and networked together, and yet communication is broken down so much to sit down and listen. Can I listen to the other person? No, this is a human being who has values and reasons. I heard a man once say that if you could ever make somebody else's worldview or belief system look ludicrous, chances are you haven't understood it.
Mm-hmm.
And to sit down and just understand where a person's coming from. There are reasons why everybody believes what they do, right and wrong. And to look at somebody and say, like that guy did, and say, "Well, you just enjoy this," it's just totally dismiss somebody. It's like, what are you trying to accomplish here? Are you trying to prove something? Because that's not the way Jesus acted.
Mm.
And going back to good, how are they going to see good unless we model that? Now, look, they misunderstood Jesus. I get that. They're going to misunderstand us as well. But I got to give them every chance to look at me and the way I interact with them and the way I care about them and show that I care about them. I can't just sit back and look at the world and go, "Oh, I love everybody," but I'm not going to do anything to try to help.
You look at rallies. I mean, and there's rallies for anything,
right?
know? There's rallies for abortion, for homosexuality. There's rallies for Trump, whatever, and people just knock heads at these rallies and scream at each other. Yeah. Nothing's going to happen. There's zero communication because I know what you think, you know what I think, and all we're doing is just yelling to make ourselves feel better, apparently.
It's like Bill Burr talked about at Conan. He was on the Conan O'Brien show, and Conan said, "So do you watch the Democratic what do they call? It's not the rally. What do they call those things?
Debates?
Not the debates. Maybe it is the rally, the Democratic, the Republican, or the GOP convention.
Oh, the convention.
Yeah, you watch the convention. He's like, "No," he said, "I think if you do, you're an idiot." He said, "Everybody believes, I don't watch the debates. I don't watch the rallies because everybody knows what they already want. And you don't watch the debate and go, or the rally and go, well, that's a good point. No, you say, that's my guy. And and I got my sign and this, that, and the other, instead of actually listening and let's have some dialogue back and forth.
Can I step on some toes? Not yours. Can I step on some toes? Is it okay if we step on toes here?
Yeah.
What about preachers that get up and do that?
Oh,
That bark and take these amazing stands from the pulpit that all 150 people in their pews are going to agree with, why are we preaching stuff that everyone's going to agree with anyway?
Right.
How does that help us? And you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Yeah.
No, I do. Because they got their nice. That's why I always say preaching is one of the easiest things to do.
Yeah.
It's hard to sit down and have a conversation with somebody that disagrees with you. It's easy to stand in front of 10,000 people that agree on to say amen.
Yeah.
And I got the mic in the floor and nobody's going to speak up and say anything back,
Right.
There's nothing to that. But I was thinking about debating too, like the old school debating. I wish we could change that some way, somehow. I like the back and forth. In fact, I don't like arguing so much. I like going back and forth with somebody who can take it. It's kind of hard to find those people. I'm actually talking to a guy who I'd like to have on here that I can go back and forth with. Nobody gets offended.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we love each other. But my point being is that if we could get two opposing sides without destroying and knocking down each other and trying to that's what debates turn into. Well, this fool here, or we say, I've heard people in debates be like, well, our friend over here believes blah, 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 blah. And the audience laughs. It's like, score one for me. No, you didn't help nothing, because those people still don't believe and don't see, and they're just mad at us now.
Yeah. It's crazy, because the idea is if and it gets back to the worldview. And I think at some point, I think you're going to have one of these just kind of talking about worldviews. And it's fascinating to get into, because you said something that was very deep earlier. Like, if you don't try to understand somebody else's worldview, you have zero shot at communicating with them. If you don't know where they're coming from, you have zero shot at communicating with them. And to understand. And when we started this out, I gave two basic worldviews. It's a lot more complex than that, But within those two basic worldviews, even just understanding I'm a Christian, so that's going to mandate certain things in my life. Somebody else isn't a Christian. I understand that I can't, if I want to win them for Christ, I can't do it with the Bible. If I'm going to win them for Christ, they don't believe there is a God. So what do they care about the scripture? Right. And that's where it starts to come through with my attitude, my example, my living good, being good when I don't have to be good, or when the world says I don't have to be good, or sometimes when I shouldn't be good. I'll tell you one, this is not me being good. This is my wife and my dad being good.
Okay. All right.
and them forcing me to be good. Okay. So week before last, we were at the Cracker Barrel for dinner, and we came in right behind a tour bus full of mostly kids and some adults, right? So they sit us down. The place was packed. So we sit down, and I mean, literally our table is almost touching the table next to us. And it's me and my three kids, my dad and my wife. And next to us, there's three teenage boys and one chaperone, I guess. He's probably 30 or 40 years old, and the other guys are teenagers. So they're laughing and cutting up, whatever. They're on, school trip, church trip, who knows, whatever. And they're having a great time. They're kind of laughing at other people in the restaurant and, whatever. Well, right before they left, chaperone gets up, and he was sitting right beside Amanda. And he leans over and sneezes right on her plate. Now, luckily, I kind of caught it secondhand. Like, I heard him sneeze, and I heard everybody at our table stop talking. I was probably too engaged with my biscuits and gravy or something to notice, right?
Non-caloric biscuits and gravy.
Exactly, yeah. Oh, what's going on? Because when I start getting wise to what's going on, these guys are already starting to walk out. And my wife is just glaring at them. And I was like, what happened? She's like, he just sneezed on my plate. They all laughed and walked out. And so I pushed my chair out to go talk to him. And she's like, don't. She's like, don't. And I'm like, no, I need to. And my dad's like, no, you don't need to. And I'm like, everything inside of me is like, yeah,
go get him.
I gotta go, at least talk to this guy and ask him why I do something so stupid, get him to pay for our meal, whatever. He owes me something in that moment. The man acted like a child. I'm going to go try to talk to him, and he's going to probably act like a child some more. The guys, his boys thought it was funny. There was nothing that was going to happen in that situation. The world would say, you're justified in beating that dude down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
goodness.
And I even feel some of that listening to the story, like,
but goodness and grace and meekness, I think, is probably where that kind of comes into play. These attributes of God, these attributes of Christ, they come into play when the world says you need to do this and you're justified in doing this and you don't. And that's what hopefully my kids saw in that moment. Thankfully, my dad and my wife, showed it way better than I did. And maybe somebody else in the restaurant, who knows? Maybe nobody else did. But that's how we engage the world and really what that's called is character. Being good when you don't have to be good.
Well, we follow a Savior who was called a glutton and a drunk, basically, because of the people he hung around. A lot of times, and not to slam church people, that's not it at all. It's just to say that we struggle. But a lot of times the people that a lot of Christians, kind of shy away from, Jesus was there with and eating with and listening to and talking to. And I had a point. He wasn't just hanging out, whatever. But the whole point was to help and to try to show that. And people that cost him personally, some of I've talked about this before, but this sense of I ought to do, where does that come from? It comes from somebody that not just is over me, but somebody that gave me life, that I owe everything to and has sacrificed everything. It's the only system, and you might speak more to this. I don't know of any worldview, religion, where the God or the supreme power in that worldview sacrifices for the subjects, except Christianity. If there is one, somebody out there who maybe listening to this, let me know, what it is, but I don't know of any of those. And so what do I do in response? Well, is it just because I owe? Well, that's not part of because grace doesn't figure in, but is it part of gratitude? Yes. And then I want to imitate that to other people. If he can do that for me, what can I do for you? You know what I mean?
And really, I mean, you're right, because where there are sacrifices made, it's always for something better and something better materially. Okay. In Islam, these guys will gratefully be martyrs, but they're going to get 70 virgins.
Yeah.
Okay. Polyamorous relationships is what they're going to get. But in Christianity, believers understand, I know that there's a vision of heaven that's a mansion, a robe, and a crown and riches beyond belief, which I think me and you both don't believe that's what it is. The sacrifices aren't made for something material. It's made for a relationship.
There you go.
And just like you would sacrifice pretty much anything for your wife and kids, that's what God did for us because we are his children. And so the goodness that we enact is just modeling him.
Yeah, that's right.
So that we can be with him.
Exactly. That's the point. Is this good has not just been, it's not like, and God God has every right to say, do what I say because I say do it. Kind of like we do to our kids sometimes when we get frustrated. Do what I say because I said do it because I'm God. But he never does that. He explains, he gives a reason. If you look deep enough, there's a reason behind everything he asks. And all that reason is geared around is what is good and for our good as well. Now, can I give that good back and hold to that standard as well? Not perfectly, but then there's the grace and all that. So there's plenty of reason besides just do what I say. I think a lot of people look at Christianity and it's like, it's a bunch of restrictions. Yeah, it is, but there's restrictions in every aspect of life. You don't go to work and act like you want to and keep the job. You don't go in society and act like you want to and stay in society without being thrown in jail. You know what I'm saying? There's restrictions everywhere that we allow ourselves to be subservient to. This just has better and greater reason.
And if it's all about restrictions, then we totally missed the point. And if you really want to, and I don't know what heaven and hell is going to be like. I mean, I know what the Bible says and I have my ideas, but we aren't going to know until we're in either place, right? But imagine a world where everyone is wholly good, and is selfless and is reaching out for the best for others and is humble and meek and all these qualities of God. What a beautiful place to live. Imagine a world much like ours, except there's no hint of that kind of goodness that exists. When it's all self-seeking, when it all boils into, what the end result is of, if there's no God, there's really no reason to be good.
It's the worst of the worst.
That's the worst of the worst. That is hell.
Right.
I've never seen the movie, but I've heard and I've seen the commercials of like The Purge and like where, and I'm assuming that the premise is there's a night that people can just do whatever they want. It's just pure lawlessness, I guess.
Yeah, best I can guess.
And I mean, that looks like hell to me. That looks pretty bad. And the commercials, people are locking themselves in their house and their rooms and stuff because this is that's what zero good looks like.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that. So let's pull this out of you. I could talk and go and on and on, and I've enjoyed it. I appreciate you being a part of this. I meant to thank you for being here, and you're coming back whether you like it or not. So just get ready for it. I'm not asking. Take a couple minutes and sort of sum it up, or what would your plea be to people? How do I want to put it? I don't know. Yeah. What would your plea be to anybody as far as this whole lesson and wrap it up, so to speak? Those last few thoughts.
Sure. So what I would say is, if your worldview doesn't include God, ask yourself some really hard questions and wrap your mind around that. Like, why be good? Why be good? Why does your conscience exist? Why do you desire? Why do you cringe at certain things? If you see if you're walking down the street and you see a guy kick his dog, why does that, light a fire inside you? And so ask yourself that question. If you do have a Christian worldview, challenge yourself to make sure that your definition of good fits God's definition of good. If we don't live to that standard, and there's a lot of people that don't, and I don't a lot of times, Solomon is very right when he says there's a way that seems right unto a man, but its way leads to death. We will absolutely strive for good, and that's not enough. We have to make sure that good is in line with the standard. And so if that is your worldview, then strive for the standard. Strive for the standard. No matter what denomination, no matter what you believe, I think the Bible tells us, ask and it shall be given to you, seek and ye shall find. If we are searching for truth, we're going to find it. And that should be a never-ending search. And then again, if you're coming from a Christian worldview, allow that idea that people are striving for good and may not realize that they are an estranged child of God, but that's what you're seeing in them, is that goodness. So when you're seeing that person who's marching for abortion, you don't have to agree with them. In fact, I would, very much hope you wouldn't agree with them. But in how you talk to them and how you receive them, understand that that's coming from a place of good, most likely, and they are modeling their father, who's also your father. And that's something that you've got to, I think it can help us communicate with people.
It does. You're reminding me of James 3 as far as talking to Christians, that when he's talking about the tongue in there, he talks about cursing those that are made in the image of God.
Sure.
And he says he doesn't qualify that. He's whether it's good people or bad people, it's just people. And those people are made in God's image as well. And Jesus died for those people, the worst that you can think of, or the ones that stand so far against God.
How many of those people does God not want to come to heaven?
Exactly. And would forgive like the prodigal son's father forgave, and rush out and celebrate, the angels rejoice, and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard to remember that because you can get political, or you can get caught up in sort of the culture and the moods, and it's us against them and this, that, and the other. And it's really just God against Satan. And the devil's behind all of this stuff, and God's still begging people and still waiting to send Jesus back because so many people are lost and so forth. I hope that people who listen to this will have questions. I hope that you'll share this with other people as well. Share it with your Christian friends. Share it with with people who don't believe and are looking and thinking about it. And it's been good. It's been good.
I appreciate it, man. I've really enjoyed it.
All right, brother. We'll see you soon.
All right, sounds good.
All right. We want to thank you guys for watching. I guess I'm looking in the right camera, Clayton. That one there. Yeah. Clayton pointed to. I want to thank you guys for watching and being a part of this. I want to, again, ask you, if you're on YouTube, to subscribe, to keep up with what's going on. You can hit that bell, the notification bell, that lets you know when new content comes out. It's usually on Mondays and Thursdays. And then we are active on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. I'm working on it, LinkedIn as well, and other places. But you can go to the website. There is a place there where you can actually support this. We're working on getting that up. We have Patreon, where you can become a supporter for as little as $2 a month. So if you got $24 this year, $2 a month that you can put into helping us build this project, it's for lack of a better term, it's an online ministry, and you would be like a ministry partner in that way. There are products there that is still labeled with Quest for Greatness. We're going to switch that over, but you can buy gear there, and all that goes toward helping build this. We're not putting any money in our pockets. The idea is to really to get the word out, as with this podcast, to make people think, but also with the entire project, mainly geared toward those who are Christians, to help us know what a practical relationship with God looks like, what the truth is, and dispelling myths about Christianity. Some of those we talked about today, some of the myths that Christians hold to, were the false concepts and so forth. So thank you for watching this. Hope this helped. Share it with other people. We'll see you next time.